Hello friends. Today I thought I would talk about prickly pear. I've recently learned that prickly pear grows over a huge part of the United States. You tend to think of it in Texas and New Mexico, Arizona, the warm, dry states. But apparently it's growing in Michigan and all over. So I thought I would share talk about prickly pear today. Now, here in my part of Texas at least, it's pretty much thought of kind of as a weed. Most people, not necessarily me, but a lot of my neighbors, a lot of people I know, they try real hard to get rid of it. They don't want it on their land. And it's not a good thing to have on your land if you just want to go hunting or you have livestock, because those stickers are pretty sharp. For those of you who are not sure what prickly pear is, this is a prickly pear plant. And no matter what you're doing with prickly pear, yeah. Let me get one in the sunshine. Yeah. Handle with care. Yes. And Tiger's here to help. Prickly pear. Okay. These pads or leaves, you can actually buy them in the grocery store. I've seen them in the grocery store here in Texas. They're called nopalitos. I've seen whole pads with the needles cut off, and I've also seen them in bags cut into strips. I haven't ever tried the nopalitos. My understanding is they're kind of like okra, that they have that glutinous, slimy texture to them. I think it's something people just really love or they hate. But it is a popular item to cook up, and that is one of many reasons why you might want to grow prickly pear. Another is, now it's winter time, there's no fruit on here, and I'll probably do another video when the plants are in fruit, but prickly pears are delicious. I like to make a jam jelly and can it. It's so yummy. And I mean, a lot of people do that. That's extremely common to do. And for that reason, I have been harvesting my smaller plants that are growing in locations I would prefer them not growing in, and transplanting them. So you can actually grow them. In fact, purposely grow them. In fact, I saw a program once where somebody had a farm and he was actually growing prickly pear, nopalitos, for commercially. He was selling them to grocery stores. Restaurants. He was selling them commercially. So that is done. I like prickly pear. I'm trying to get it to grow as a living fence to keep my livestock from going off property. And there's a specific area that I have been transplanting prickly pear, and I will show you that today. Before I decided that they might make a good living fence and a place where I would easily, not have to walk all over looking for pears to harvest, I would compost prickly pear. And that is definitely easier said than done. Okay, I'm on the other side of this cedar tree. I was just on the other side. I just moved over here. This is probably the same plant. Now, I'm sure the fruit, I think those are little seeds in the fruit. And so you could probably harvest those little seeds and plant them, but honestly, I doubt anybody does it that way. Prickly pear, Number one of the reasons it's hard to get rid of prickly pear is because the roots travel. I mean, I was just on the other side of this tree, and I bet you those roots traveled all the way over here, and there might have at one time been pears under the tree, but this tree has gotten so big that it shaded them out. And so, and I would come across roots that were 2-3 yards long before they finally broke. A yard root length was common. So if you are actively trying to get rid of prickly pear on your homestead, you want to try to get up as much of the root as possible, not just the plant. If you're trying to get rid of prickly pear, this is a problem. If you're trying to grow prickly pear, it's a good thing. Here is a beautiful, it's got some fungus or something growing on it. It's starting to look a little peaked, may not survive too many more years, I don't know. But it's been growing here along with some other plants. I think that's yucca. Ever since I moved here, which would be about 9 years ago. I moved January 2010. And this prickly pear plant, big plant, has been growing on my septic tank lid. Yes, this is my septic tank, guys. And I've got prickly pear growing on it. I don't know what it's growing in. There's just rock and stuff on it. I mean, there used to be more dirt covering this when I first moved here, but there's not much left. I guess it's just gotten washed away. I'm kind of afraid to climb up there to get rid of it. I don't want to bust the lid. It's my septic system. But it's growing here, and I see fruit growing on this plant every year. So this is just to show you, you don't need much soil to grow prickly pear in. It can be it's really, really hard to kill prickly pear. Now, if you are trying to get rid of prickly pear, well, okay, how do you compost prickly pear? I'm not sure you really do. You cannot just throw prickly pear into your compost pile. It will start growing. If your goal is to get rid of all the prickly pear on your property, my suggestion, well, there's two ways I have found in my research to killing prickly pear. The first is fire. When I'm burning brush, I often will pile the brush on top of the pears and the plants and just burn them. When I have a good brush fire going, and there's pears nearby, I will literally dig them up. Here's a little teeny, just single pear. It's probably from a root from this plant. I will literally throw it into the fire. I have also been known to throw pads into my burn barrel. Now, if you just harvest them, it can be tough to, there's so much moisture in these pads. And it's really hard to burn prickly pear unless you have a really good fire. So in the burn barrel, I would often throw a pad in after I had finished burning and let it dry there for a week, maybe 2 weeks before what conditions are good to burn my trash, the paper and stuff. I have no trash pickup out here, so I have no choice. Burning trash in your burn barrel is necessary. And so usually after a couple weeks, it has dried enough that when I fill up the burn barrel with trash, it will burn. It may not burn totally that first time, but it will usually the second time I burn it. So that is the most effective way of killing prickly pear. Another method that I have successfully done for killing prickly pear, especially if you want to add it to your compost pile, is to drown it. I have used this trough that just fills up with rainwater, and I have filled it with prickly pears that I have pulled up. And I literally make sure they stay submerged for a couple weeks. Often if you get the bigger plants, they'll just sink. The root structure will just make it sink. After a couple weeks, it becomes quite slimy. It starts disintegrating because it's just drowned. It's soaked up so much water, it's falling apart. Then I will use a pitchfork, and here's still sitting here, my trusty little pitchfork, and put it in a wheelbarrow and take it to my compost pile or hugelkultur. I've dumped a bunch in hugelkultur and dump it there. And that works, but you got to make sure it's pretty dead. Okay. Okay, there are a few things that you need when harvesting or transplanting prickly pear. Now, you could use a shovel. I find that a hoe works very, very well. Remember, I have very shallow, rocky soil, and I much prefer the hoe. You need to experiment in your area, which you prefer, but I honestly love the hoe. Second, you don't want gardening gloves. You need leather gloves. The reason is those stickers will go through leather. The gardening gloves are useless. I find leather gloves work best. Those stickers will even go through leather. And because of that, you want tweezers. Yep, I have 5 or more of these suckers lying around. Yeah. And so whenever I'm going out harvesting prickly pear, I always keep tweezers right in my pocket, because I never ever know when I'm going to get prickly pears the stickers in my hand. So those to me are the minimum things you need. That's the minimum. Now, some people will use a pear burner. Okay. This is a pear burner. The flame comes out here. You can adjust it. You adjust it here, but it's hooked up to a propane tank and you need one that you can just carry around. When these things are full, they can get super heavy. So depending on what you are capable of carrying, the propane tanks, you can get it in front of any grocery store or anywhere. When those things are full, I can't lift them up. It's too heavy for me. Because, I'm hiking over rock and everything. So no, I purchased a smaller tank, and I take it to a propane place that sells propane. They'll have huge trucks that will deliver to people's houses, and you can go and get your own propane there. So that's what I always do. I'll just when this is empty, I'll throw it in the back of my pickup truck. And when whatever town I'm in, out here, every town sells propane. Every single town has a place you can buy propane. And so I'll just find that propane store, and they'll just fill it up for me. Because when this is full, I have no trouble carrying it. But the 20-gallon one, I do. And, you just take one of the Bic lighters for your barbecue grill, light it, once you turn the propane on, light it, and then you can just what people will do is they'll burn all the needles off. Now, I've tried that. Tried burning the needles off the pears and stuff and the pads. I don't know if I just don't have it high enough or what the deal is. I haven't had much success with that, so I just don't do that. But I may try it again in the future when it's pear picking season. But I haven't found that to work too well with me. But I do know a cattle rancher once told me that cattle love the prickly pears, and he'll go around and burn all the needles off, and then they'll just eat the prickly pears. I know even with the needles on, my goats will eat the pears. There have been times, well, I discovered this when one of my goats, Lawnmower, kept getting stickers in her nose. So, and then I caught her eating the pears. I would have loved a picture because honestly, you know, the pears are so red and ripe at that time that it looked like she had lipstick on, but she licked it off before I could get a picture, unfortunately. But it was funny. So you may want to have a pear burner when out harvesting your pads or your pears. That's up to you. Okay, I'm by the driveway and at the northern edge of my property. This is where I want to do a food forest, so I've been cutting down all these cedar trees. You can see like this one. See, this one right here. I've cut all the branches off to feed the goats. And I've been trying to get rid of prickly pear. I've been pulling it up on a regular basis for several years now, and the plants just keep returning. And here's 3 right here. I know there's a few more scattered in there that I've seen. Even, see, there's right there's a pad. So even in this rock, you know, I've dumped it. A lot of these rocks right here, I dumped here from somewhere else. And they're still growing. So now if you're trying to keep the pears alive so that you can either eat them, you know, you want to harvest them alive for eating or for transplanting, it's kind of a tricky thing because clearly you don't want to touch the plant. But there are places on this plant you can successfully touch. And that's the root. The root, you can touch the root, but no matter what, I always have my leather gloves on. I always keep tweezers in my pocket. See, they're right there in my pocket. And here's my hoe. Now, I'll put the glove on. Excuse me. And so now I have a gloved hand. And what you do is you try to get under the plant to get to the root. Oopsie, gotta make sure the camera's facing. And see, once you get to the root, these roots, ooh, that one broke. But here's a more sturdy, or here's even a more sturdy part of the root. And so what I do is I just carry it by the root. This is one method. I'll demonstrate the other method. And I take it to where I want to plant it. So I'm going to leave it right here for now so I don't have to make 2 trips. But, you know, as long as at least one, I mean, this pad is dead. But this other one, it's green and it should stay alive. It should work. So, okay. Another method, let's see if I can do that here. Okay, so see, this one, honestly, I could also just carry it by the root all the way to where I want to transplant it. And that's what I'll probably do with just these two. I'll put my glove on my other hand, and I will just carry it to the location that I have decided where I'm trying to build my wall, my living fence. Okay. Okay, now what do you do if there's not enough of the plant to, I mean, like, look at this leaf right here. Okay. I am not going to grab any part of that leaf. Period. I do not want to touch that leaf. I will get prickly pear stickers in my hands. And that's one thing I like about the hoe, is I can just carry, just like this. I can walk to where I want to plant the prickly pear, just carrying it. And I do this all the time, especially when you have a teeny plant that you're trying to get rid of. It's in a bad location, and you want to get rid of it, but there's nothing to hold, and you do not leave a pear. If you dig up the pear, don't leave it. It won't die. You must transport it. Often if I'm trying to take it to the burn barrel, or I'm trying to drown it or something of that nature, I will have a bucket near me that I can dump the plants in the bucket. So if I'm getting a bunch of leaves that, a lot of little teeny plants where I'm just getting the leaves, I'm not getting the root structure, I can just dump them in the bucket and carry it that way. But most of the time, or not most of the time, but often, especially if there's just one little plant in the area, and so I just want to transport this one little plant, I will just carry it on a hoe, just like this. So this is where my neighbor pushed a bunch of cedar, but then he quit. And there's nothing to stop the goats from going over there, and they do go over there because they don't know property boundaries. And so this is where I've been growing or planting the prickly pear. Now there's already a bunch growing here. I just have added more, hoping that this area, will, especially like all here, the cedar trees, if it grew all in here, it would be okay. As long as I could get from down this pathway, I'm fine. And then I could, when it gets bigger and it starts producing fruit, I can just come down here and harvest it. So it'll have, more than one purpose. It will be a living fence, and it will be a place that I can harvest prickly pear and make jams, jellies, whatever. And people have made prickly pear jam, candy and other things, syrups. So it's a win-win situation. So this is where I am planting the prickly pear. Well, if you live in a very, very, very dry desert condition or an extreme drought, you may want to water the ground first. I never have. Not sure how necessary it is, but that's your choice. But that would be the only thing you need to do to prep your ground. You do not need to rototill. You do not need to plow it in any way. You don't need to take a hoe or shovel don't need to disturb it, period. The way you plant prickly pear is like this. You take your pear and you drop it. Now, since it landed on the rock, I'm going to move it over a little bit so that it's in contact with the dirt. You do not need to amend your soil. It doesn't need you to add lime it doesn't need anything. You don't need to cover dirt over the pad. Nope. That's all you got to do. This is done. This prickly pear has been planted. It's ready. It will start growing roots into the ground from this pad. And being that it's January as I'm filming this, I think by summer I won't be able to pick this up. That's another thing. And now if you live in the north where your ground is frozen solid, yeah, you might want to wait until your ground is thawed out before planting it. I'm in Texas. Honestly, I'm hot. I'm going to change into a short sleeve shirt when I'm done. Yeah, I'm hot. So, not an issue for me. You know, it's already in the 60s. It's supposed to get in the 70s today. So, this is done. I've done all that. I honestly, I can leave this. I do not need to come back and water it. Now, if you live in the desert and you're just not seeing, it's not the rainy season, you may want to add a little bit of water occasionally, but honestly, not too much. You don't want to overdo it because there's a lot of liquid in these pads. So this particular pear is now transplanted and it's done. I'm not going to worry about this ever again. It will grow its little leaves or roots down into the dirt, and it will start eventually growing new leaves, and that's all I need to do. Okay, I just went back and grabbed the 2 plants I left over on that rock in the driveway. And these big ones are kind of more tricky to plant because, first of all, it's harder to just lay it on the ground. You need a pad that has contact with the ground, and this can be more difficult. But I have the root, and so what I have done is, let me break this branch so it's out of the way, is I dug a little trench. And I'm just going to take this and put the root in the trench. Now, as you can see, it still doesn't want to really line up with the trench, but I'm going to turn this into more than one plant. Okay, I just took the hoe and I just hammered it. I used the sharp end to just cut these leaves off. And so now, instead of one big plant, I have 4 plants. And I kind of dug a little trench for the root here. So I'm going to try to cover that root up. It really honestly doesn't need to be covered very well because the pad is also now touching the ground. If the pad was not touching the ground, I'd probably be a little bit more concerned about the root drying out. But I have the pad touching the ground, so it should be okay. So now I can use my hoe and just pick these pads up. Oh, and this one right here, it's not dead, but it's not doing that well. There's some more over there, little pads. I'm just going to take this pad over here and, I'm just going to, here's an area where the grass isn't too high. There's like a little space, so I'm just going to put it right there. So that one's planted. I've now planted 3. My hope is that this whole area right along here on the fence line just becomes a nice big plant, and that I will be able to harvest. Let me do this one. And I will be able to harvest pears. It will keep the goats and other animals from using this as a crossover. and I will be able to harvest pears.